Thank you to Publit and to Book Republic for starting this great conference. I spoke in Milan last year and really enjoy being here because I'm based in New York, though I'm global digital director for Penguin. So coming to these conferences in Europe is a great opportunity for me to learn more about what's going on in terms of digital innovation here. So Anna's story about Y Combinator is a great example of why Javiers' paper is so important, vital to our future, because the substance of what they said to you is fantastic, because it's an expression of how reticent angel investors and all these venture capitalists are to invest in businesses that involve book publishing at all, because they know how slowly publishers are moving in terms of adopting innovation and experimenting with content. So we need to be really careful about that and change our ways so that investment in innovation continues. So I'm going to take you through some of the typical hurdles from both sides. And then walk you through a couple of examples of the work that we're doing. Yeah, that's a penguin falling into a killer whale's mouth, which hasn't happened yet, fortunately, to me. So some of the typical hurdles for publishers, I'll start with. Structural, and Anna referenced this as well. Who should the startup speak to at the publishing house? And I think that it's a little bit more complicated than just appointing one person, depending on the size of the publisher, because we sort of play this game when startups get in touch with us: animal, vegetable, mineral. Is it distribution? Is it product? Or is it really sort of business development and partnership and expanding the scope of what we do? Because depending on the answer to that question, it could either be appropriate for a salesperson to talk to them, a marketing person, or a product person. So we do a lot of passing back and forth of contacts internally to make sure that the right people within Penguin are considering the idea. But I also want to say, particularly with regard to sales, salespeople are focused on making their numbers, which is their job, and fair enough. But you need to, I think, set targets for new channels and distributing a certain amount through unknown channels that, in January or December, when you're setting your targets for the year, how much business do you want to make through channels that you don't yet know about? And asserting that kind of structural forecasting around new channels, I think, can be really helpful to incent people within your organization to take these opportunities seriously. So contractual, what type of sale would we be making through your platform? Is this similar to the deals that we have today? Is it going to cause us problems in terms of the royalty structure that we have in our contracts with authors? Those are really important things to get a sense of before you start pitching your idea to publishers, because it may be a non-starter from the moment that you start talking to the publisher if you haven't considered those things. Sorry. And cultural. I think, as Anna was alluding to, there is discomfort with changing the way that we've been doing business. And so I spend a lot of time with startups coaching them not to use certain words, like don't say windowing. And try to integrate the way that you're describing your business into language that is familiar, or use metaphors from the print business to help people understand what you're trying to accomplish. So, hurdles for startups. There are a few. I'll start with lack of industry knowledge, which connects to what I was saying about contractual hurdles. But I think in New York, it's interesting. There are 3 or 4 people who used to work in publishing houses or run publishing houses who act as a sort of concierge service for startups. They consult with them for 3 or 4 months at a time and go through the business model with them, coach them in the way that I'm saying to, don't use this language, use this language. These are the right people at these houses. And I think that's been really helpful to connect startups to New York publishing houses. And I don't know whether that's happening in other cities, but I think it can be a quite productive way of moving forward. It's almost like they're literary agents for startups. They know the publishing house and which project would be appropriate for which house. Then let's see. Sorry. I just want to say one more thing about this. The reason that I have the television there with books inside it is I think that I get pitched by a lot of startups who are taking models from other digital media sectors like music or movies and simply slapping books on it without really thinking through the way that people consume books and the way that that's starting to change. So I think it's important as a startup to be a reader so that you can speak to that experience from a personal point of view. So competition. This is something Anna and I have been talking about a bit, and I'm not exaggerating when I can say that I've been pitched Netflix for books or Pandora for books by more than 20 companies. So there are a lot of people working on similar ideas, and I think a productive way forward can be for those companies to talk to each other, be very aware of the value proposition that the other companies have, and consider collaborating. And if there's no interest in collaborating, being very good at articulating the competitive differentiation of the service you're providing. So I often start in a conversation with a startup by saying, who do you see as your competitors? So that I can try to understand how they're thinking about the business problems that they're addressing in building the services that they have. Okay. Then pivoting too fast or too slow. It's inevitable in the startup world that you may start with one idea and it takes you somewhere else and you realize how to become more valuable to the industry that you're trying to serve, which is fine and natural, but you need to be careful about how you communicate that to companies whose content you need to do your business. One story that I'll tell is a startup that I really admire and have worked with closely came in, and I introduced the founder to the president of Penguin in the US. And she opened up her iPad and she started showing the product. And she was like, well, tomorrow we're going to meet with Snoop Dogg. And immediately, this woman who's president of Penguin in the US, her eyes glazed over, like, why are you talking to me if you're trying to pitch musicians? I thought this was about books. And she is offering a service that is quite valuable to publishers, but it's a little bit ahead of the curve. And by not explaining why she's also including musicians, she immediately lost the interest of this particular executive. And then if you go too slowly, meaning publishers keep giving you advice about how to alter your model and you're not responding, then obviously that's frustrating for the publisher. Goals not aligned with the publisher. So this is something that I think is an interesting aspect of the way that technology works. There are a lot of startups coming up with a particular idea and their goal is to be acquired by a larger company. And for me, as somebody trying to protect the content that we publish, that's really anxiety producing, because who's going to buy that technology? Is it going to be Amazon? Is it going to be Google? What's going to happen to the work that I put into that platform? So that's a delicate area, because startups don't always want to be straightforward about what their end goal is, but as straightforward as they can be is helpful. So then a few examples of how Penguin has been collaborating with startups and funding innovation. Let's see. So today, actually, while I'm here, my team in London and New York are at an event where people within Penguin, Pearson, and other companies within the Pearson family. Pearson is the largest education company in the world, and they own Penguin. So a bunch of people on my team in both cities are looking at 10 business problems, people nominated business problems from all over the corporation, and they're choosing 10 of those ideas, and they're going to invite startups to embed themselves within the organization to tackle those business problems, and also send people from Pearson companies out into startups to solve the problem. So that's an interesting experiment that we've just engaged in. And part of the relationship that Penguin has with Pearson has been very productive, because they're really avid. They have a really avid appetite for collaboration with technology companies, collaboration as well as acquisition. So Inkling is a company based in California and has an interesting platform where they're trying to expose the guts of the book, if you will, to search. In some ways similar to what Anna's doing, but Anna has other services that Inkling does not offer. And Inkling came to Pearson about 2 years ago in the context of an accelerator that we fund in San Francisco. So Pearson and Penguin fund accelerators and incubators in San Francisco, London, and New York, and we should probably do it in other cities as well, where startups are groomed, and we get to meet these companies in really early stages. So we met Inkling a couple of years ago through that relationship, and we're able to give them feedback on the platform. So it was 24 months ago, and they've changed their platform, and since they've made all these adjustments to it, we've contracted with them from Dorling Kindersley, which is Penguin's travel and reference guide. So you can see this is the DK Bible, and they've exposed all of the contents within the Bible out into search, and it's a very media-rich experience. So that's an experiment that we're trying with them. They're also selling chapter by chapter. Cydia, this is a New York-based startup that I referred to, Snoop Lion. There you go. They are addressing an interesting problem that I think, as I say, is a little bit ahead of the curve. I think most people would agree and know that fiction sells better than nonfiction digitally. And that's a problem that I've been thinking about a lot as we try to grow our digital business. Why is it that nonfiction readers who would have bought a print book in the past are not picking up ebooks as avidly as fiction readers? And I think there are a couple of different explanations. One is there's a lot of information available on the internet. But I also think that we're changing our brains, and we're changing the way that we consume information because of the speed of the internet. And so what Cydia has done, and I was the first publisher to provide content to them because I really believe in the idea. So this is an example of one of the products that we've made with them. Kevin Kelly, who's editor of Wired magazine, published a book with Penguin in New York called What Technology Wants. And as you can imagine, he has a lot of people interested in his ideas as the editor of Wired, but we weren't selling very many copies of his book. So this was an experiment to take the book, and you can see these images over here, these stacks. We stripped away about 60% of the book, and we present it in this app. And some people have said when they see this landscape of the book that it's a table of contents on steroids, which is an interesting way of thinking of it. And it's not a page-turning experience like this. It's cards. You're flinging cards. So if I were touching this on the iPad, I would go like that, and it would go back into the stack where it came from. So each stack is involved in an idea, and it's a different, much faster way of reading nonfiction. And the problem they're trying to solve is how can we make reading nonfiction faster without making it stupider? So I think it's an interesting problem, and we're supporting them in that experiment. Small Demons, I think, was mentioned or referenced slightly earlier. What they're doing, and we are collaborating with them in this, is trying to enrich the metadata around books and connect books more effectively to pop culture, and through that address the problems of discoverability and browsability. So those were all startups that came to Penguin and said, we'd like to work with you. This and the other two examples I'll go through before I conclude are startups that we have funded. So eBooks by Sainsbury is a London-based startup that's funded by 3 different publishers and by Sainsbury's, the grocery store chain. And it's a new retailer. They sell print books and ebooks. And Random House, Penguin, and HarperCollins put money into this new company to create more competition in the marketplace. Similarly, in New York, Penguin, Hachette, and Simon & Schuster have funded and founded Bookish, which is an independent company that's just launched about a month ago and sells, Tova referenced it earlier, they sell ebooks, print books, and soon they'll be selling audiobooks as well. And they're focused on the problem of discoverability as well. They have a recommendation engine, so you can type in, the last book that you read and see what the recommendation engine suggests you might try. And they also are approaching, they're trying to cover books in a pop culture kind of way. So they have 7 editors writing original content that they have all kinds of deals with AOL and other places to share that content and draw people to the site. And lastly, this is a sort of startup within a corporation. I started Book Country a couple of years ago through innovation funding from Pearson. So I applied, I had this idea. I wanted to start a community where people could help each other improve their books and then go on to self-publish them if they wanted to. And Pearson gave me the funding to do that, and I went out and found technologists to build it. So it's the goal in doing that was really to create a brand that was not a penguin brand, where we could be a little bit more experimental, a sort of sandbox, try out new technology, learn what it's like to really create a site that is a community for people, because that was a new experience for us. And learn more about what it's like to run a direct-to-consumer business, which I think is really important for publishers. So in summary, as a publisher, I would recommend that you try to set aside some money to support research and development and experiments. Don't put those experiments into sort of business as usual analysis for 18 to 24 months. Allow some projects to be confidential. When I was working on this project, as you can imagine, I started it as an editor, so I understand some of the point of view that editors have. If I had had to go around and pitch this idea internally as I was working on it, I would have been so exhausted that I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I was allowed to have this little team of people that was helping me, and I didn't have to defend the idea every day. I could really go deep and work on it. I think that's tremendous. And let's see. I spoke about creating targets for selling through new channels. I also think it could be helpful to create targets for how many marketing and discoverability campaigns you're going to try that you've never tried before. Come up with a way of sharing what's working and what's not working. And perhaps most importantly, come to conferences like this put on by the smartest startups around so that you can open your mind and make reading as important and as engaging for future generations as it has been for ours. Thank you.